My main themes are living things, dreams and fantasy, and detailedness. All three of these themes are directly linked to my personal curiosity, and to me are what inspire and motivate me to create art. They can be integrated into multiple forms of art and are not exclusive of each other. My first studio work, the piece of the fox and the rabbit, was also my first oil painting ever. I painted it for the World Peace Day, and it shows that a fox, which is a predator, is in peace with the prey, which is the rabbit. Of course, this does not happen in reality, but is present in the painting as an added element of fantasy. I used the eyes to convey feelings of harmony and to show that the animals were somehow smiling. I only drew a few animals before starting the course, and so drawing a fox and a rabbit seemed sort of difficult. However, my aim to draw them in a semi-realistic style was fulfilled to some extent, and I did that by making the eyes shiny and by painting the fur with white strokes. Some of the difficulties I encountered were with media, since I used turpentine as a solvent for the oil paints, and it was hard to keep up with using it, as it was awful to inhale. I also worked with a limited set of colors, thus the limited variety of them in the painting. The piece of the fox and the rabbit turned out better than expected, and so I had enough courage to paint my next studio work, titled A Rose in a Void. It was a watercolor painting of a rose, and I chose to paint a rose because it was perfect to experiment with light with it, and because the anatomy of this well-known flower intrigued me. I added a few colors that did not belong to the color scheme of the original flower to make the painting seem less realistic. My next one was Stellarfish, which was my first try with gouache paint. It was a study at first that was based on an image from a natural history book, but I decided to include it as a studio work later on because the process of painting it was different than usual and did not involve previous thinking and planning. In this process, you could see the creation of art in its purest, unadulterated form, in which the choice to paint it was merely based on the visual likability of the image. It was with Camouflage, my fourth studio work, that I started getting immersed into the themes, using all three of them. It was painted by oils on canvas. The purpose of the painting was to create an optical illusion with the subject, as the viewer might see the crab and the watermelon as one when viewed from afar. However, as the viewer comes closer and focuses on the subject, a distinction between the crab and the watermelon can be made, and the viewer can tell that the crab was blended or camouflaged in the watermelon. To create this illusion, I used slightly different hues of red while painting, and I painted the watermelon and the crab as realistically as possible, making the background black so that the viewer is not distracted from the foreground. Then it was time to experiment with 3D art. Before the studio work, I created another one that wasn't included in a submission, which I made using aluminum wire and paper. Therefore, I decided to use clay with this one to better reign over the medium, since its manipulatability is high. I modeled the hand after my own, since I could reference it directly. This sculpture is of a hand growing from the ground, alongside a sunflower with missing petals. It represents the growth and progress of art, embodied in the hand, which is what creates it. I used amateur tools, since I don't have proper clay modeling ones. Collage was never a medium I was partial to, but I needed to do something that I wasn't comfortable with. This was referenced from the same natural history book as Stellarfish. I used newspaper and magazine clippings and patterned paper to do the collage part. As for the leaves, branches, eye, and beak, I was short on acrylic paints, so I used whatever paint tubes that were lying around, namely gouache tubes, watercolor tubes, acrylic tubes, and poster colors. I never anticipated that I would actually enjoy creating the robin, and I didn't expect a satisfactory outcome. However, this piece taught me that art isn't limited to paint or to pens or to anything really. Hawamar is a painting I referenced from a photo I had taken of a fish of the same name. As you can see, the fins are missing and some of the fish are cut open, and that was because I took this photo while they were being prepped for cooking. This painting is culturally significant because Hawamar fish are a species of fish native to the seas of my country, Bahrain. The painting also symbolizes the temporary nature of life and the more temporary nature of enjoyment, especially because Hawamar fish are very rare and have a limited season of only 3 weeks per year. I used oil paints for Hawamar. This painting is partially incomplete since I didn't paint the bottom right corner, but I added the carpet design to it using Photoshop to make the painting look complete. Thrift Shop was created using digital media, namely Paint Tool SAI and a graphic tablet, which is Wacom Intuos 4. I worked on it for 3 months and over the summer break. My aim was to stuff as many cultural and pop references as possible, like book titles, albums, tags, license plates, and posters. My aim was also to reward the viewer, because the longer they look at it, the more things they'd notice in it. The process of creating it was a very complex one, and it took lots of time and effort. In My Mind is a product of my fascination by the universe. It might be said that it is a self-portrait. The expression perfectly conveys how I feel about the vastness of the scale of existence. This studio work came about from an investigation of color, and it has 4 sections: black and white, warm colors, cool colors, and reverse. I made sure that the reversed part perfectly matches the normal parts when reversed, and I used computer software to match the colors. I used acrylics and gouache to paint it. As I investigated Impressionism, I decided to paint a bouquet. Flowers are very popular when it comes to Impressionism, but this flower painting is a bit different from the typical Impressionist ones because it has a modern aspect to it. That's because assorted bouquets are fairly modern, and the polka dot wrapper also indicates modernity. It was referenced from a real-time bouquet that we had in our house. Under our investigation of Africa, I painted an African silhouette. The world's view of Africa is often limited to thinking that all there is to it is its villages and rituals and wildlife, neglecting the fact that it is a continent with 54 countries, and that it has modern centers of finance and economic growth and cities. The foreground shows the stereotypes, best represented by a giraffe in a savanna, and the background shows the things that no one seems to notice, like economic activity and urbanization, represented by buildings, and rich history and culture, represented by the pyramids. At first, I was going to draw the giraffe, but then I decided to leave it as a silhouette to give the drawing an abstract-ish feel. I created this drawing almost exclusively using the lasso tool in Photoshop. And finally, Reverie, my final studio work, is a concluding mashup of all my themes, creating a piece in which I let my imagination go wild. It includes a self-portrait in the middle and contains seemingly unrelated things like a castle, 2 moons, many stars, an aurora, and a battle between a unicorn and an armored man. The castle is the De Haar Castle in Utrecht, Netherlands. I gave myself the steampunk look to fit the rest of the theme and to give the painting an added element of fantasy. I used gouache colors because I discovered that they suited me the best when it came to complex paintings. I loved them because they provide lots of freedom for the painter and are very easy to work with and to layer. Unlike acrylics, they don't cake up when they dry and aren't weak like watercolors. I chose those themes because they suit many contexts and can be manipulated to create all sorts of artwork and ideas, as they are pretty broad and each can be explored from various corners. I liked them because they did not restrain me to a certain idea or certain media. I aim to make it a point to use tools I am unfamiliar with, like oil paints, gouache, and clay. I also developed my skills in using media I am familiar with, like watercolors, acrylics, and digital media. I explored a set of techniques and experimented with mixing paints and on different surfaces and spaces. Thank you for listening.